Good morning. Welcome to this webinar on the solicitor's qualifying examination and what it means for employers. Firstly, I'm going to start off with two apologies. My first apology is for having a stinking cold. People are usually happy not to be in the same room as me, but probably they're even more happy today. I will do my best not to cough and splutter my way through this webinar, and let's all be grateful for the mute button when I use it. Secondly, I'd like to apologise for the use of acronyms. Despite the fact I work for the SRA, I'm not usually a fan of acronyms, but we will likely be using at least two acronyms regularly in this webinar. The first one, SQE, for Solicitors Qualifying Examination, and the second one will be QWE, which stands for Qualifying Work Experience. However, I'm not going to make any apologies for our speakers today, as we have an excellent lineup. We have Julie Brannan from the SRA, and then we have three experts from the employer side. We've got Katrina Watson from the law firm Reed Smith, Luke Evans from the law firm Kennedy's, and then we have Maria Kell from the BBC legal team. Now, all of them have either led or been involved in their organisation's responses to the SQE and how they're developing their talent. So the bulk of this webinar, I'm going to have a chat with them to hear how they're adapting to the SQE, what they're doing, what are the opportunities around it, but also maybe what some of the challenges are. And the aim is we hope to give you some practical advice from the coalface. But before I do that, I'm going to have a chat with Julie Brannan from the SRA, who, after working as a partner in a city firm and also running a law school, obviously thought that wasn't enough and then went on to lead the development of the SQE. And me and Julie are going to have a bit of a whistle-stop tour through some of the basics and what the SQE might mean for employers. Now, we'd like this session to be interactive. You can click on the link below and ask questions. It's nice to know your name, but you can submit questions anonymously, and we will be prioritising questions that are very much linked to what the SQE means for employers. So let's move on to our conversation. So first up, we're going to start with you, Julie, and I suppose a good place to start is to remind everyone what the SQE is.
Yes, thanks very much, Ben, and hello everybody. And some of you may well have already seen our jigsaw puzzle slide, which we've used for some time now to explain the key elements of qualifying as a Solicitor of England and Wales under SQE. So top right-hand corner of that slide, obviously candidates have to pass the two elements of SQE, SQE1 and SQE2, and perhaps, Ben, we could have a word in a little bit in a moment about what exactly they consist of. Candidates also have to have a degree or equivalent qualification or experience. They have to complete at least 2 years qualifying work experience, and again we can perhaps pick up on that and explain it in a bit more detail in a moment. And they must, as at the moment, meet our character and suitability requirements. Those elements can be taken in any order. They're not in it. There's not a particular timetable to follow, so it's any order of taking those elements, except that you have to pass SQE1 before you can progress onto SQE2.
And it's probably worth just emphasising that degree doesn't have to be a law degree, does it? Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be a law degree. It doesn't have to be a law degree, a degree of England and Wales, and we have a system for just checking equivalence of foreign qualifications as well as qualifications within this jurisdiction.
And could we just remind people quickly why are we doing this? Why are we making this change?
Yeah, so two things. First of all, it's a single way through to admission. So we have one exam. It's not that you go to different universities who set their own separate exams. It's one exam for everybody who wants to qualify as a Solicitor of England and Wales. And that gives us greater assurance that everybody who we admit has been fairly assessed to the same standard. And at the same time, we've taken away some of the requirements for particular qualifications or a particular pathway journey to admission. For us, we don't mind how you develop the required competencies for practice as a Solicitor of England and Wales, but we do care very much that you do have them, and that gives a great deal more flexibility in terms of how you train, and we hope that that will address some of the bottlenecks and problems that there are in the existing system, like the training contract bottleneck or the high cost of training and so on, which prevents people who have the talent and would be able to practice competently as a solicitor from doing so.
So two big reasons there: consistent standards, and then trying to get rid of bottlenecks that might prevent a talent from all backgrounds getting into the
Yeah.
legal profession. So how's the training market shaping up so far?
So we have got a good range of training providers who've already stepped up to the plate and are offering SQE preparatory training courses, which is great to see. Lots of variation and variety there. Some traditional face-to-face classroom teaching, lots of online, some integrated courses where the training is delivered in tandem with work experience, and I think perhaps some of the speakers from the profession will perhaps talk about that in a moment. So lots of variation, and lots of affordable options too. So it's early days, but it does look as though there are options out there which are cheaper than the old LPC route through, which could be very expensive.
And so the training markets, the initial signs are quite positive. That's developing. So when does the SQE come into effect? Has it already come into effect?
Yep. So SQE regulations came into effect on the 1st of September, just gone. And we have also just run our first SQE assessment. So SQE1 ran for the first time on the 8th and 11th of November, which was fantastic to see. And we had over 1,000 candidates who took it in 26 different countries around the world, over 100 different test centres. So, a really, extensive network of places for people to take the SQE. So that was fantastic. Results are being processed at the moment. Obviously, we have to do lots of checks and analysis around all of that, and they will be out in January.
And is it probably worth adding, isn't it, Julie, that that thousand that was sort of positive on the numbers, but that generally won't have included any trainees that have gone through sort of law firms, because most law firms, and we're going to discuss this, are only starting to take on trainees or thinking about doing it in the next year or so. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So we've had a very sort of gradualist approach to implementation of SQE, recognizing that lots of people already part way through the old system, and those who are part way through may well want to continue down that route. So we anticipate, in time, though, that number may well raise to sort of 10,000 people a year taking SQE. But we were very, very pleased with those numbers this time round. It obviously provides a very good numbers base for the statistical checks and analysis that we need to do. So we were very pleased with that.
That's good to hear. And I suppose so the SQE's come into effect now. Does that mean that everyone has to do the SQE from now on?
No, so let's move on to the next slide. It's certainly our intention in due course, as I said at the start, that SQE will provide the single point through which everybody has to go in order to be admitted as a solicitor of England and Wales. However, we have got a transitional approach in relation to this, and what that means is that if you have started down the existing route, you have the choice of continuing down the existing route up until the long stop date of 2032, or of hopping onto the SQE route. So you have that choice. So people currently in the system have extra choice, and we work very hard to achieve that. Sort of high level for firms, what I would say is that firms had complete choice to offer traditional training contracts to anybody up to I think it was the end of August, this just gone, so the arrival of the new SQE regulations on the 1st of September. Moving forward, firms, it's entirely up to firms whether they make a decision about whether to offer only new style qualifying work experience. But firms do have a choice, if they wish to exercise it for a little while, to continue to offer traditional training contracts to candidates who are, if you like, in the transitional cohort, because they have started or completed one of our regulated qualifications, so a qualifying law degree, a GDL, LPC, and so on. And pretty much it's very detailed, and I'm not going to give you a whole load of calendar dates which you can't absorb at this point, but a sort of high level rule of thumb is that for people to be in the transitional cohort, they would have had to have started their courses this academic year.
So in sort of university challenge style, if you've started, we'll let you finish, but
That's right.
effectively post October, that's
Yeah.
not the case. And actually, I think it'll be interesting to speak to Luke and Katrina in a bit because I think they're taking different approaches to how they're managing that transition. But let's move on to the assessment, just at a very high level. What's the difference between what SQE1's testing and what SQE2's testing?
SQE1 is testing legal knowledge, and it's not your recall of legal knowledge, it's your ability to apply legal knowledge in the sort of common transactions and disputes that a newly qualified solicitor might encounter. And you can see from this slide that it's split into two separate exams: functioning legal knowledge 1, functioning legal knowledge 2, and that functioning is all really about the application. And you can see from this that the content covers subjects which traditionally are taught at the academic stage of training, either on the law degree or the conversion course, and it also includes some of the practical subjects, the procedural subjects, which are historically have been taught on the legal practice course. They are amalgamated together and split into those two separate pots, and you can pass FLK1 and fail FLK2, so they are two separate exams, and if you pass one and fail the other, you can bank what you have passed, and you have another 2 goes to get through that, and you just have to resit what you failed.
So that's our third acronym, FLK. That's functioning legal knowledge, if that's referred to again. So should we move on to SQE2? SQE2 then? What's that
Yep.
covering?
So the FLK, it takes the form of computer-based single best answer multiple choice questions. So it can test your application, but there are a whole load of things that it can't test. It can't test your ability to write. It can't test your ability to research. It can't test your ability to develop an argument. Lots of things it can't test, which are absolutely critical for safe practice as a solicitor. And so we test those through SQE2, which are the practical legal skills assessments. And you can see there the list of skills assessed and the context in which they're assessed. There's no choice across all of this. Everybody has to take those assessments in those contexts. There are 16 assessments in total. 12 of those are written assessments and 4 of them are oral skills assessments. Like with SQE1, the written assessments for SQE2 are taken in a very, very broad network of test centres, so the Pearson VUE test centres in this country and abroad. But the oral skills assessments, because we need to be very, very careful that everybody has a standardised, equal, equivalent process for those oral skills assessments. They're to be taken in 3 centralised test centres in London, Manchester and Cardiff. So candidates will have to travel to those test centres to take those those 4 oral skills assessments.
And would it be fair to say actually SQE1 and SQE2 is actually a sort of a higher standard or threshold than what the LPC is at the moment?
Yeah, so everybody will recognise the LPC is designed to prepare people for day 1 of a training contract. The SQE is a point of admission assessment, so it's designed to test people, to test that they can demonstrate the competencies we require for minimum safe practice as a solicitor. So it's the detail is all set out in the assessment specification, but it's testing the competencies in the statement of solicitor competence to the standard in our threshold statement, which says the minimum standard for safe practice as a solicitor, which is level 3 in that statement. And so the detail is all there.
So let's move on to what this means then for law firms and in-house teams and other employers. And probably the biggest change in terms of for them is the change to qualifying work experience. So do you want to tell us what's that change?
Yeah, so qualifying work experiences, it has some similarities with the old period of recognised training. It needs to be at least 2 years long, 2 years full-time equivalent long. So it's very similar in terms of length. And what its purpose is it's really a learning opportunity. So it's for candidates to learn what it feels like to work in a regulated environment, providing legal services, to learn from experienced senior solicitors who practice day in, day out. So it's that sort of apprenticeship model of copying, learning by doing, and copying from expert practitioners. But there are also some quite important differences. So at the moment, a training principal will make an assessment of an individual at the end of the period of recognised training and will assess whether they have met the practice skill standards. There is no assessment of competence within qualifying work experience. Qualifying work experience, as I say, is purely developmental. It's an opportunity to learn. We check whether the learning has taken place through SQE. And of course, that goes to the heart of our approach, that we want people to be assessed fairly and consistently to the same standard. And it's no criticism of anybody. It was just a very complicated system that PRT is signed off by individuals. We have thousands of training firms around the country signed off by lots of different individuals with no system for people to benchmark the standards that they are applying to individuals. So people do not need to confirm that the competencies have been developed or that a particular standard has been reached. It's just an opportunity for candidates to develop some or all of those competencies. People signing off QWE need to confirm that to us, that they need to confirm the length of qualifying work experience which has been carried out, whether there are any character and suitability issues. So they're quite focused, those requirements. And if they are met, then the QWE should be confirmed to us.
So I'm going to pick you up on your fourth acronym, Julie, because not that I'm counting, but PRT, which period of recognised training, but what a lot of people would know as the training contract. And I suppose what this means, it's not the death of the training contract in terms of firms can still offer training contracts, but it's the death of the training contract as a regulatory requirement, something you have to get to qualify. And as you said, one of the key shifts here is that with qualifying work experience, you're not confirming whether a candidate is any good, are you? So perhaps do you just want to remind us what is being confirmed? And that's right, isn't it? And perhaps you pull up a slide here.
Yep. I mean, this just repeats what I said a moment ago. So it's that the candidates have been exposed to some or all of the competencies. It doesn't need to be all of them. Of course, the more the better, the greater breadth of experience, the better learning that will be taking place, and the more a candidate will be learning from those opportunities. But it is just a learning opportunity, we can take confidence from somebody's performance in the SQE, whether they have developed those skills, and that's what will be the hook in terms of getting people through. So it's very limited. Have they developed some or all? Can be as few as 2 of the competencies. How long is the work experience which has been carried out? Were there any character and suitability issues? That's all.
And so let's just move on to it sounds like in most instances, it's likely that if someone is working in a law firm or perhaps an in-house team, perhaps there is a paralegal, in most instances, is it likely that that is going to count as qualifying work experience?
Indeed, so it has to be working in legal services, and I think when people are considering this, that it's always important to bear in mind that working in legal services. And in terms of what that means, I mean, as good a definition as any of legal activities in Section 12 of the Legal Services Act, which is about the provision of legal advice or legal representation in connection with the application of the law to a legal transaction or a legal dispute. So that's what we mean by working in legal services. So it means that somebody who is working in your finance department doing finance, or working in your marketing department, or working in your HR department, that they are not themselves of providing legal advice or legal representation. So that would be outside the boundaries of qualifying work experience. But somebody working in the office on a client matter, part of a team, even at a relatively sort of humble level, that's still within that overall ambit of what we mean by qualifying work experience.
And quickly, who can sign off qualifying work experience?
So there must be a solicitor of England and Wales. We don't require any longer that you have a training principal, but it must be a solicitor who can genuinely give us the confirmation that we want, because they have the evidence in order to do that. So they know how long the person has been working in the organisation, they know what they're doing, or they have evidence about what they're doing. They don't need to be day-to-day supervising, but they can rely on the systems and processes within the organisation. The solicitor does not need to have a practicing certificate, but they do need to be on the roll, and that's so that we have a regulatory relationship with the person who's making that declaration to us, so that we can take regulatory action should something happen which is not what it should be.
And what should firms then be thinking about in terms of qualifying work experience?
So I think there are distinct opportunities here. Clearly gives firms the opportunity to excuse me, to consider opportunities for recruitment of wider categories of staff who may be able to progress onto admission as a solicitor. So it gives opportunities for paralegal roles. For you to be able to say to people in paralegal roles, there is progression possible through this period of employment. Also, of course, current staff. So not just new staff that you're recruiting, but current staff. Are there current staff who might have aspirations? Do you want to encourage current staff down this route? Does it help you? What does it mean for your thoughts about your paralegal pool of talent, and where you might go with that? And of course, just to remind people that just simply signing off QWE doesn't mean that somebody's going to be admitted as a solicitor. Of course, they have to go through all the other steps, most notably passing SQE1 and 2 before they get there.
Now, I'm going to call an end to QWE discussions there, partly because we could speak for an hour in that, and I know that because we have quite a few webinars on qualifying work experience. So if you really have loads of questions about that, I would recommend you go off and have a look at some of those other webinars, or we can maybe pick up some questions at the end. But we have had some questions come in, and we will try and get to as many as we can towards the end. But one of them is from David, who said, how do you see apprenticeships working with the SQE? And that was one of the last things I wanted to ask you about. What are the other opportunities for firms coming out of the SQE? And apprenticeships is one of those, isn't it?
It certainly is, yes, and apprenticeships work really, really well with the SQE. Apprentices have to take something called an endpoint assessment, and the endpoint assessment is SQE2. They have to take SQE1 at an earlier stage as something we call an in-program assessment on the solicitor apprenticeship pathway. But it's all very, very well aligned, and it was our fundamental principle that solicitor apprentices coming through, of course, like everybody else, would have to be assessed to the same standard as people coming through traditional routes. So it works very, very well, and we've got lots of people. In fact, Maria, I think you've already got some solicitor apprentices, so can talk about it in practice later on.
And then one final question I just wanted to just raise, because we were just talking about the assessment a little moment ago. So Kevin's worried, sent in a question. He's worried that effectively, if you've got a law degree, don't you already know a lot of the knowledge you need for SQE1? So then making people train for that or pay again, isn't that sort of doubling the expense and penalising people who've got a law degree? And he's asked, could you get an exemption from SQE1? Well, the short answer to the exemption question is no, there isn't an exemption. But Julie, just want to explain that, and also why it might not actually be so expensive if you've got a law degree and it's testing something a bit different.
Yeah, so a law degree will certainly help with the preparation for SQE1, because it gives you that grounding in that great breadth of legal topics that you learn through your law degree, and your foundation of law legal topics will all be assessed through the SQE. But the SQE is assessing something probably a little bit different, or it may be different depending on what your law degree covered. There's great variety in the way that universities approach their law degrees. It is assessing problem solving and application of the law. It's not assessing the development of the law of contract or socio legal aspects to points of policy in relation to how law works. It's very much practical problem solving. What does the law mean for your client in a particular situation? And so that's really the different bit. It's the very professional, practical orientation of the exam.
And of course, actually, the SQE is one single exam, whereas law degrees, there's 100 different providers providing law degrees. So it's about that consistency of standard. One question I can answer extremely quickly we've just had coming is, does QWE need to cover different areas of the law? Just one area? Is conveyancing just sufficient? And one area of the law is fine. So let's move on to our panelists now. Thank you ever so much for that, Julie. But I'm really keen to hear from Luke, Maria, and Katrina. So we're going to hear about how they're responding to the SQE, and let's dive straight in there. So let's start with you, Luke, because actually I think you're the first person on our panel who already has people SQE trainees. So do you want to tell us a bit about the approach you're taking at Kennedy's to the SQE?
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, so Kennedy's, as Benedict said, have recently taken on our first cohort of SQE trainees who joined us in September of this year. So we have introduced a new program for graduates called the SQE training program. We partnered with BPP University, who are delivering a graduate solicitor apprenticeship. So this is a 30-month program which essentially will deliver the preparation for the SQE1 and the SQE2 exams that the trainees will need, and will incorporate the SQE1 and SQE2 exams. So the way the program will work at Kennedy's is that the trainees will join us. As they joined us in September. We'll have 1 day off a week for the 30-month program, where they're at BPP University doing the preparation towards the exams, and we'll sit the SQE1 and the SQE2 exams during the course of the program. So with the SQE training program, which we've put in place, our trainees are recruited into one specific area, as opposed to the training contract, which we're also continuing to run, where the trainees would rotate around different teams in the normal way.
Thank you ever so much, Luke. That was brilliant. So I think next in the order of SQE trainees starting is Maria. You've got people starting, I think, in March next year. Do you want to talk us through the approach you're taking at the BBC?
Yes, hello. Good morning, everyone, again. Yes, at the BBC, it's all about apprenticeships, really, because we have public funds. I work for the BBC Public Service. And if we offer apprenticeships, then we are able to sponsor people through more of their legal education and therefore increase our pool of candidates. So we are already on track. We have people who took level 3 apprenticeships who are now able to take level 7 apprenticeships. We have people who took level 6 apprenticeships who can now take level 7 apprenticeships as well, leading directly to solicitor qualification. And what Ben referred to is a new programme we are developing from March next year. We've already selected our candidates, and they're going to come in as graduate apprentices, and we are offering an integrated programme of SQE and qualifying work experience, and that means that those candidates don't have to self-fund the LPC, and it also means they get paid for the entirety of the apprenticeship scheme, which is obviously great news. And then as an add-on to that, another flexibility which has been brilliant for us is that our existing apprentices who are on the longer programmes do the day release, the same that Luke's scheme will do, and our graduate apprentices are doing block release. So we are structuring it in different ways for different reasons. But we've got that flexibility, which is fantastic.
And just before why have you done that change from day release to block release?
It's really because the longer term apprenticeships are very integrated into the business. So it's fantastic for those apprentices to work 4 days a week and study 1 day a week. Whereas at the moment, and we may change our minds in the future, the graduate apprenticeship scheme is more of a direct substitute for the old training contract procedure. And so therefore we're looking to have people who are as qualified as they can be. So they'll have SQE1 before they join the business, although we will be able to give them more integrated approach of work experience and then SQE2. So for the moment, we're treading softly, I suppose. That's our way of making the change as easy as possible for the business needs and for the supervisors who are used to having a 5-day-a-week trainee solicitor. We're changing that. We're maintaining that model really for the moment, and we'll see how it goes. We may develop further.
Thank you. Well, Maria, we'll get you back next year or so to see whether things change. But let's move on now to Katrina. What are you doing at Reed Smith and to respond to the SQE?
So we've taken what we believe is quite an innovative and unique approach, combining the study and preparation for the SQE with part-time working, but within our business services, pro bono and client teams. So this is very much for us the evolution of our old business intelligence projects, where our LPC students would work solidly for a month at the end of that year to do their projects. And now that will be spread out over 2 4-month-long placements, working 2 days a week within the firm. But as Julie said, this won't count for QWE. We're very keen that they actually are being integrated within Reed Smith, get to know our systems, our processes. We are also maintaining the in-depth knowledge from the LPC, so we're working with the College of Legal Practice to create the advanced knowledge and skills aspects. So we're maintaining that, which will ensure that our candidates will get a master's qualification at the end of their SQE study for both 1 and 2, and doing this advanced knowledge and skills. And finally, we are pairing with 2 relatively new entrants to the market. So Barbary for the SQE preparation and the College of Legal Practice, as mentioned.
And that it's good to hear, or even on this call, we've got a diversity of different training providers being used. And Katrina, I suppose compared to Luke, you're going quite bigger bang, aren't you, on the sense that you're switching away from sort of LPC trainees, and SQE is going to be the way from when you introduced that. And do you want to talk through why you made that call?
Sure. So I guess just for consistency and clarity within the firm, that we felt having 2 streams running concurrently has the possibility of being quite confusing. The restrictions and the structure around a training contract, everyone's very comfortable with that, and we felt it made more sense to have a sort of hard stop. So we are intending to move fully over to the SQE route in one go. So we did have a few people who had gone the LPC route. We've managed to shift all of those into our final training contract cohorts. But from a point, I think it's from the QWE starting in September 2023 for us, that will be a fully 100% QWE cohort. We are actually maintaining a lot of the structure of a training contract because we like rotation, we like doing contentious experience. So there's a lot of similarities, but in the sense of how to manage the comms internally, supervisors, all of that, for us, it just made sense to just have that hard stop.
And I suppose that's a key point, is that if something's working well for your business with the old system and that worked well, you don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You can keep that and try and build on it, but hopefully there's that greater flexibility there. Now, Luke, it's probably fair to come to you on this point because you've not gone for the hard stop. Do you want to talk through why Kennedy's have gone for a different approach there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we also have offer legal apprenticeships and solicitor apprenticeships. And we've been working with BPP offering these apprenticeships since 2016. And we're working with them closely on what program we're going to put together for graduates coming down the SQE route. And we just felt that it's a good opportunity to create, I suppose, a hybrid between how our apprenticeships work, where the trainees are on a day release model, are recruited into one specific team, and it has worked really well for Kennedy's, and we thought it was a good opportunity to create a similar program for graduates in the business. But we also wanted to have that opportunity there for graduates who still want to experience different areas of law, still want that seat rotation. So certainly we wanted to keep the door open for that opportunity, so we're continuing to offer the LPC routes for the time being, and certainly we that's not something we want to stop. So appreciate that moving forward, and as the SQE does become more established, we'll certainly need to look at moving the training contract program onto the SQE route as well.
Thank you, Luke. Let's jump back to you, Maria, and I'm trying to work out whether I'm glass half full and ask you about the opportunities with the SQE, or glass half empty and ask you about some of the challenges, but perhaps I'll ask you about both. How has it felt from your end in terms of perhaps some of the opportunities? I think you've touched on some of those already, but also what have the practical challenges been for you?
Yes, in terms of opportunities, it's enabled us to have school leavers come in, and in due course they will become solicitors. So that was absolutely impossible before. They are thrilled as well, these school leavers, to be obtaining law degrees as part of the path to becoming a solicitor. And that's really brought a new kind of refreshing perspective to our practice. So that's one of the main opportunities. The most recent thing we've done actually is arrange for a foreign qualified lawyer to take the SQE to become an England and Wales practicing solicitor. So that's another opportunity. So we call them staff apprenticeships, which we distinguish from our early careers or new talent apprenticeships for people that we recruit in. So that's another real positive that we can give career development to existing members of staff. I think it's quite common in in-house firms to have foreign qualified lawyers. So that's valuable for us, and we can utilise the apprenticeship levy to do it, which is obviously great too with public funds. In terms of challenges, at the moment I'm still grappling with the new timetable for my incoming graduate apprentices in March next year, and that's because they're not fully qualified when they start the QWE stroke training contract process. And so we have to think about possibility of resits and the fact that they need a month out basically in the middle to do SQE2. So that's quite a challenge, and I haven't yet embarked on the internal comms around that one, but that's one of my next challenges coming up.
Katrina, what are your views on perhaps other opportunities or challenges or both?
I think for me, the big opportunity is the flexibility, and that's what we've really grabbed hold of in terms of how we can mix things up and do things differently. And that's been fantastic. We've got more autonomy in the sense of making decisions as to how it's going to work for our firm, which really has meant that we're anticipating that our sort of first seat QWE people will really hit the ground running. They'll already be integrated within Reed Smith from the year prior, and that's a huge opportunity. That kind of learning curve in that first seat is quite stark, and they'll have done all of that. They'll know where the printers are, where the coffee machines are. They'll already have a network of colleagues, which I think is going to be phenomenal. So that's been the huge opportunity for us. If you wanted challenges in the same question, I think it's why not? It's for us, it's kind of working out how we're going to approach the other alternative route, because we don't have a huge number of paralegals, but I'm anticipating that there will be people who want to do their QWE with us, and so it's working out what that will look like. And again, as Maria says, a lot of this is going to need extensive internal comms just to explain the new process and how it works. And if I could put myself in the shoes of people who are starting to think about this, the big challenge is that you need that internal expert. For us, that was me. I remember I was first given this job of being responsible for SQE as a kind of mat leave cover role, where I just thought I was babysitting it, and then it became abundantly clear that this was not a babysitting task. This really needed my full attention. I needed to educate myself on it, and you need that internal expert to be able to guide the firm in terms of the decisions. But then secondly, you also need that working group. You need the key decision makers in a room who will determine what your approach will be to this fundamental change in legal education. So those, I would say, looking back, were challenges that we managed to overcome.
Yeah, so you can't just have the HR team or the development team developing the approach if it's not involving the partners, or because it's actually going to affect the whole model of, or potentially affect the model of the business, presumably.
Absolutely, and that's really key. And you know, to give an example of one place where we made a bit of a change was that for our working group, we thought, well, the GDL isn't required anymore. Why don't we just do away with it? You know, our training with Barbary will enable anyone to pass the SQE. So let's save time and money for those who've done a non-law degree. But when we presented that to the firm, we got a great deal of pushback. And so we've just said, you know what, that's not a big concern for us right now. We will park that decision for the next couple of years. We will still ask non-law to do a GDL just to see how it's going for them, see if they feel like it's repetitive to then do the SQE training. And then we'll revisit that decision. So you're absolutely right. You do need a lot of people on board. We had knowledge management lawyers, the office managing partner, head of HR, head of L&D, and a spread of the training principal, people who could make decisions but also had that background knowledge. So that's been helpful.
Thank you. So what about you, Luke? Let's go to the challenges again, because I think we've covered quite a lot of the opportunities, but what are the challenges at your end at Kennedy's?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said, we have solicitor apprentices at Kennedy's, and they were some of the part of the first group to go through the SQE1 in November, and we'll be going through the SQE2 in April. Now, as our apprentices have the work on the day release study model, one thing we wanted to take into consideration is that they do have the appropriate preparation for the SQE2 exams. And I appreciate that the structure of the exams being sort of a week long, basically a week where they're completing the exams. We wanted to make sure that they had something similar to prepare them for it. So we worked with our training provider, BPP, and have put together, I suppose, a bespoke study plan for the apprentices to make sure that the preparation that they're getting for the SQE2 exams really mirrors how the exams will take place. So we're having 2 sort of preparation weeks between now and April, where they'll be going to BPP University for the entire week to make sure that they have that preparation before going and sitting the exams.
That's great. And we've got a couple of questions come in, which one I'm going to try and answer very quickly, and then another I'm going to feed into both Julie and actually the rest of the panel. So the first question, we've just had it come in saying, who decides which practice area an SQE trainee will be allocated? And is there an option to change this over the 2 years qualifying work experience? I think the very short answer to that is there's total flexibility there. So that's between the business and the candidate. I suppose the key thing is, it's really important for the business and that candidate to have those upfront conversations so people understand what the expectations are of that qualifying work experience. But there's a lot of flexibility there. But then we've got a follow-up question from Fiona. Thank you for this. And she said, and perhaps I'll come to you first on this, Julie, but then perhaps we'll come to our panelists, because I know people will be doing things differently. She's asked, if the SQE is the way to test if competencies have been met, then in practice, aren't people going to have to do most, if not all, of their qualifying work experience before they do SQE2? Julie, do you want to kick off on that, and then we can perhaps hear from some of our panelists about their approach?
Yeah, and Fiona's quite right that QW is a great way to prepare for SQE2. And I think when you're looking at the learning opportunity that's provided by QW, it's always really, really helpful to have an eye on the demands of the SQE2 assessment and the sort of skills that we will be assessing through the SQE2 assessment, and to try and give people as much opportunity of those sort of skills, doing them in practice before they take SQE2. So yeah, that's a great approach, but it's not the only approach. And we do know that some firms are taking the view that they want their people to have passed all parts of the SQE through classroom-based learning before they start QWE. We are sort of agnostic on that. We see our responsibility as checking that people have those competences, and we recognise that businesses will run their affairs in different ways, which will suit them differently. Some firms have more funding, for example, to pay for classroom-based learning. Others actually need to rely much more on the work experience that people get doing their job. Both of those approaches absolutely fine. Our role is just to check that people really are safe to practice through that's demonstrating they can pass SQE.
So Julie, you talked about some people there, and I think we've got some of those people on this call. So Katrina, for instance, you I think before the 2 years qualifying work experience, your candidates will be taking the SQE exams. Do you want to talk us through why you've taken that approach?
Sure. So yeah, I think the technical term is front loading. So we're front loading both SQE1 and SQE2 during that period of time where they'll be part-time working 3 days a week, studying for those and doing their 2 days a week placements. And a couple of reasons for that. In the current structure with training contracts, it would be quite challenging to our mind to give the students the time out to study and the time out to actually do the exams. So with SQE2, that's obviously the 5 days, and they'll need study time just in advance of that to prepare. And you know, law matters don't really work like that. It's quite challenging to take staff off. So we wanted to bring all of that time forward. Another reason was that the SQE2 pilot indicated that actually you could succeed as well with that exam with study as with practical experience. And so we felt that that was encouraging, and that actually our study support with Barbary would enable people to still pass SQE2 without actual real live practical experience. And then finally for us, in terms of the potential, and I don't want to sort of freak anyone out, but there are the likelihood that with a new system and a new scheme, people might not pass first time. And so we are looking at, if we front load SQE1 and 2 exams, there's more time and give in our process for people to do retakes. At that point, obviously, it would mean taking time out of QWE, but that is built in. Whereas if SQE2 is at the end of QWE, you then have to sort of have a bit of limbo time where you continue working, but you're waiting for the next resit and the next exam results. So it all works quite neatly for us.
Thank you, Katrina. And yes, hopefully no one has freaked out. And I might come back to that point around people that might not pass the SQE. But Maria, I think you wanted to come in on this one.
Yeah, I mean, another factor for us is I think it takes, and Julie might want to correct me on this, but I think it's about 16 weeks to get the results through for SQE2. So with an apprenticeship, it can't end until the SQE2, which is the endpoint assessment, has been passed. So we do need to look at about 4 months of qualifying work experience after SQE2 as a minimum. So that's just a practical consideration.
Yeah, no, that's correct. It's a good shout out, Maria. We hope over time that we may be able to shave a little bit of time off that, because it's obviously a lengthy period, but certainly in the early days we want to sort of err on the side of making sure that we've absolutely checked and double checked and triple checked and so on, and made sure that everything is absolutely accurate.
Can I also say, sorry, Ben, I just found that our learning provider, which is the University of Law, has been really flexible about discussing these timetables. So the fixed points are the dates that the SRA set for the exams. But beyond that, this is part of the new flexibility. You know, you really can see how you can slice and dice it to suit your organisation. So that's been really good.
And we just had a really quick question, and Julia, you can give us, I think, a 10-second answer to this. Does the SQE2 replace the professional skills course? That's a question from Jane.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, so the professional sort of skills course goes. And I wanted to pick up your point, Katrina, because I think it's a good point. This idea that people might fail the exam. Do you think it's important that firms actually need to think about how are you going to manage that? You know, are you going to have something in the contract around how many resits people have to have? What approaches are people taking there?
I think it's a really good thing to bear in mind. We have always had the opportunity, for want of a better word, you can fail once on the LPC, one exam. You can fail once any exam, and then you have an opportunity to retake, and then we'll still keep you on our training contract in our current format. And I'm absolutely intending that would be the approach with SQE, but it's just being mindful of what knock-on impact does that have, given the structure of the SQE exams and when they fall, and the marking period as well. As Maria said, that's a really good thing to flag. So just being mindful of it. I think I'm just flagging that it's a big regime change, and so how everyone is going to adapt and change, how the learning has to adapt, how the individuals are going to find the exams, because it's a very different format to what we're used to. And so I think having that understanding of the flexibility required, that we still want these candidates to come through. We want everyone to succeed who meets the standards. But it's reflecting on the fact that, it is quite a big change, and it is going to be quite different. So what can we do to accommodate that?
That's great. So we come back to you, Luke, and I suppose you talked about sort of appointing a training provider. Could you tell me how have you approached choosing a training provider? I imagine a lot of firms will be thinking, well, I need to adapt to this. I might want to get a training provider, but how do I choose?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I said, we've been offering our legal and solicitor apprenticeships for a number of years, since 2016. So we've been working with BPP University on that programme. So had quite a close relationship with them anyway. But with that being said, when the SQE was being introduced, and we were looking, at the type of programme that we were looking at, and who could best support us with that, we did sort of reach out to a number of different providers and sort of meet with them and discuss, the programs they were offering and how they could be incorporated in the type of program we wanted to put together at Kennedy's. So I think it's just about, finding the provider that has, a course which you can incorporate and which meets your objective as a business.
And Katrina, you obviously chose different training providers. Are there questions building on what Luke said that you think you should be asking yourself in choosing a training provider?
That's a really good question. We have always used BPP up until now, and they've been fantastic, and we went out to tender, and I think for us it was the opportunity to do something different, and it's exactly what Luke said, really. It's what fits with your needs, and for us the flexibility was absolutely key. It was to try and look to maintain our master's level qualification with the combination of SQE1 and 2 and the advanced knowledge and skills. But also, interestingly for us, it was, we are looking at a flexible year-long programme in advance of the QWE. And so we didn't want to be tied to academic terms. And so, we've got that flexibility with Barbary and with Culp, that it's sort of bending what we want to get out of it to our objectives, and so it's been fascinating actually working with new entrants to the market, and they're bringing something really exciting to us, and we're really excited to move forward with them. And the two things I want to say about the providers is, Barbary have got AI technology, so the topics that the students are struggling with will keep being brought up back to the top to make sure that they've really nailed those topics that they're struggling with. And with the College of Legal Practice, it's assessed through Viva and through professional discussions with the tutors, which we think has a lot more applicability and relevance to the real world of work than a 3-hour-long high-stakes exam. So for those reasons as well, we're really excited that we've moved to these providers.
And of course, Culp is the College of Legal Practice, but I'd just like to point out this event isn't named after them. It's a very different Culp. But perhaps that is a brilliant branding manoeuvre from them. Maria, what about you? What's your approach on training providers?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much to say, actually. I mean, I echo what Luke and Katrina have both said. Slightly different for us. We had to go through a public procurement exercise because we are a publicly funded organisation. But that's only really about the structure, not really about the substance. And we were tied to academic terms at the beginning because my first apprentices are doing a degree as part of their apprenticeship. And, I've always had a very positive relationship with our provider. So I carried on with the new kinds of apprenticeships. And as I said, it's all about the flexibility. So when you get to know your learning provider, they teach you, they tell you how to do it. And that's really important, obviously, so I just send off a quick email and I always get back a, super response, really. So I've been very grateful for the support and guidance that I've received from our provider.
Thank you. We've got a question from Mark, and I think this is for you, Julie. And he's asked, he's got an SQE trainee who started on the 1st of September. He said he's adapted the usual training contract we use, but does the SRA have a precedent available that I compare it with? To be honest, with the training contract gone, is that something that we wouldn't be involved in any way, is there? That's entirely for the firm to decide, or is that right?
Indeed. I mean, there's no requirement, Mark, for you to complete any sort of checklist for QWE, but we do have a QWE template that you can use just to, if you want a document to help you check that, the breadth of the training and to keep a record of what somebody doing QWE has had, the breadth of experience that they've had. So we have got a template on our website that you're very welcome to use. And I don't know whether we can send out a link to Mark to that.
Yeah, we could perhaps put up a link in the resources or underneath this webinar afterwards. Maria, could I just come back to you, because we haven't touched upon it, but obviously in terms of in-house legal teams, there's a lot of opportunity for in-house legal teams with the SQE, because you don't need to be an authorised authorised firm. You can take on people for qualifying work experience. But do you think there's specific issues that in-house legal teams might not want to think about the SQE in perhaps maybe a different way to your traditional law firm?
Yes. So I think, again, it's probably about the internal comms. So we've got an education piece to do with all our people who may be asked to supervise work. So at the BBC, we are a regulated provider in the old-fashioned sense in BBC Legal, because we're the in-house law firm to the BBC. But we've got a huge rights and business affairs team, and there are lots of people who do the jobs there. They're not employed as lawyers, but they frequently have legal backgrounds, law degrees, and sometimes more. They might have the LPC, they might be barristers, they might have SILEX qualifications. And we anticipate actually that there'll be quite a big demand from people in those teams to get qualified through the QWE route. And therefore, they will be asking their supervisors, who are solicitors, to sign off their QWE. And a lot of our qualified solicitors won't know that's coming, or they might only have a hazy idea about it, probably more likely. So that's one of my jobs, is to draft a policy really to help and explain what people need to do under the new regime.
And I think that's a really important point. If you're watching this thinking, well, actually, I'm not interested in recruiting new trainees, or the SQE sort of academically interesting, qualifying work experience means that actually it could come to your door, because people may be asking you to confirm or sign that off, and you need to make sure you know what you're doing there. Perhaps I could just ask a question, and anyone can answer this, is do people think the SQE is going to change the way they recruit? Anyone chip in, or we'll all sit here in silence?
It's a tricky one to answer, just because I very much specialise in learning and development, and so I'd need my colleague from Grad Rec to support me. I think broadly what we're anticipating and hoping for is that we are maintaining our maintenance grant that we already pay for the LPC. That's staying for our sort of professional SQE year that we're calling it. And in addition, they will be paid for the 2 days of work in the business services placements. So in effect, we are raising the amount that people will receive for that year. And so we're hoping from a social mobility perspective that it will be more of an appealing route than it currently is, because the maintenance grant plus those 2 days of work will really make that a much more affordable option for many. But we are sort of looking to recruit more widely on that basis, and so fingers crossed that will work. But yeah, I'd have to pass to my graduate recruitment manager to advise how we're going about that.
Well, we'll do a follow-up webinar with them. Maria, I mean, you've already mentioned that the 7-year apprentice was taking on sort of school leavers was one thing that the SQE's enabled. Is there any other thoughts in terms of recruitment, or actually is it going to remain pretty similar, do you think?
No, it's definitely going to widen our pool, because we've taken the decision to look for people who are law graduates or non-law graduates with the GDL, but they don't need to have self-funded the LPC. And not only that, no fees for the LPC, but they will be paid, so effectively a maintenance grant and more, whilst they're studying for the postgraduate legal qualification, now called the SQE. So that's a significant improvement from our perspective as to whom we can invite to work for us. So more people, more opportunities. Fantastic.
And Luke?
Yes, I mean, with the, I suppose the structure of the programme we're offering at the moment with our SQE training programme, and the trainees, being recruited into one legal area. I suppose one thing we're really focusing on when it comes to recruitment is really, aiming it at those who are interested in sort of one particular area. So there is a sort of slightly different recruitment process for the two areas, and as well as recruitment, one thing we're quite focused on with the new program is a lot of promotions, so holding regular insight events for potential trainees to come along to and learn more about what the specific teams that are recruiting SQE trainees do on a daily basis.
And can I just chip in very, very briefly, Ben, just to on this question of recruitment? Obviously, depending when you recruit, you will have access to SQE data, which gives you a whole load of extra data in terms of your recruitment decisions. It may be that you decide you will recruit people once they've taken SQE1, and then that gives you sort of comparable data across, all your candidates who are applying to you. But it also gives you information on point of admission hires. So point of admission hires, you'll have SQE data for all of those to enable you to add that information into your decision pots.
Thank you, Julie. And we're coming just up to the end of the webinar, and I promised Katrina in particular, who's got her Christmas lunch, I think, this afternoon, that I don't want to keep her from that. But also, Luca Maria, I don't want to keep you longer. Just a couple of very quick questions, which Julie, I think you can answer in sort of in 10 seconds. One is we've had come in, if you've completed the LPC, would you be exempt from completing SQE1?
If you've completed the LPC, you can qualify under the LPC route through the equivalent means route. So what you can do is you can do equivalent means either through submitting your portfolio instead of doing a traditional training contract, or through doing QWE and SQE2. But actually you might consider that you don't need to do SQE2 because you can do something like the equivalent of a training contract, submit your portfolio, and you're through that way instead.
And a final question, which I think can be very short, is can pro bono work count as qualifying work experience?
It can indeed. Pro bono is providing legal services, so pro bono can count as QWE, provided other requirements are met.
Thank you. And so I think we're going to bring the webinar to a close. I really wanted to say a huge thank you to our panelists. I think I've provided really interesting insights as to how they're responding to the SQE, and I really want to thank them for sharing their time. I think that's been really useful, but it really doesn't matter what I think. We'd like to know what you think. And actually, there is a link below which you can submit your feedback on this webinar, which is really useful for us to know is, do you want more of this type of thing? Are there other topics you want to be exploring, or did the format not work for you? And that's really helpful for us knowing how we can improve these things. Saying that, our panelists have all devoted their time, so be nice to them. You can be as cruel as you like to me, particularly as I'm already 2 minutes over the time for this webinar. So I've failed in my first job of keeping to time and getting Katrina to her Christmas party. But otherwise, I wanted to say huge thank you. And I hope everyone has a great afternoon. And we've got a session this afternoon, I think, on standards and regulations. And then we have the final session tomorrow for the compliance conference, which is actually on anti-money laundering. And I would, if you're not sure whether to go to this one or not, this one got outstanding feedback at our physical event, which we did last week at the ICC. It's quite an entertaining look at anti-money laundering, if that's possible. So I'd strongly recommend you see that. But otherwise, thank you very much, and I hope everyone has a great afternoon. Bye-bye.